Why did the room go quiet the moment the clipboard hit the table? The sound wasn't loud because of the noise. It was loud because of what followed. 30 soldiers stood in formation inside the ammunition supply point at Fort Benning, Georgia, eyes forward, shoulders stiff, boots planted like roots in concrete. It was still early, too early for warmth, too early for patience, and everyone already knew what was coming. Staff Sergeant Kyle Brooks slammed the clipboard down again just to enjoy the echo. Metal on concrete, authority on display. Incompetent quota higher, he said, voice rolling across the warehouse like a challenge no one wanted to answer. A few feet away, kneeling on the cold floor, Specialist Vanessa Thompson gathered loose ammunition rounds one by one. Her gloves were off. Her fingers were red from the cold. She moved carefully, deliberately, as if each bullet mattered more than the humiliation wrapped around the task. She didn't look up. She never did. For 3 months this had been routine, a performance. Brooks knew exactly when to raise his voice, when to pause so the laughter would land, when to let silence stretch until it felt heavier than sound. He had an audience, Rodriguez with his nervous grin, Chen with his arms crossed in practiced superiority, Davis pretending not to enjoy it while enjoying it anyway. And everyone else, they watched. Some stared at the wall, some studied their boots, some told themselves it wasn't their fight. Thompson's hands trembled slightly as she picked up the last round. Not fear, not weakness, just cold. She rose slowly, joints stiff, posture straightening into something unmistakably disciplined. She walked past Brooks without a word. That alone should have bothered him. Instead of returning to her spot, she crossed to the inventory board. For a moment, it looked like she was about to post a form or correct a count. Instead, she reached into her pocket and pinned something to the cork. A badge. Bronze, scratched, worn smooth in places where fingers had held it too long, too often. Etched into its surface was a number. It caught the fluorescent light and glinted softly, like it was breathing. No one said anything. Except one person who hadn't been part of the formation at all. 723. The whisper barely left Master Sergeant Elena Rivera's lips, but it landed like a dropped weapon. Rivera had been walking past with her coffee, already halfway through her morning checklist when she saw the badge. She stopped so abruptly the coffee sloshed over the rim. Her eyes locked on the number and something old and sharp passed across her face. Recognition. Memory. A name she hadn't spoken in years. She set the cup down with shaking hands and stepped closer. Brooks didn't notice. He was too busy enjoying himself. Look at her, he said, packing now. Can't even keep inventory straight. Someone like you handling live ordnance. You're going to get someone killed. Thompson finished securing the rounds and turned to face him. For just a fraction of a second, something flickered in her eyes. Not anger. Not fear. Something heavier. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Silence chosen. A young private at the back, Williams, barely 18, fresh and unscarred, shifted forward instinctively. Sergeant, maybe you should stay in your lane, Rodriguez snapped, unless you want remedial duty too. Williams froze, embarrassment flushing his face. He stepped back into place, but his eyes stayed on Thompson. There was something about her movements that didn't fit the story Brooks was telling. The way she kept her back to the wall. The way her eyes checked corners without thinking. The way her weight shifted when someone got too close. That wasn't a supply clerk's habit. Brooks smirked and turned back to the formation. New safety procedures effective immediately. Double-check everything. Triple-check if Thompson touched it. A few uneasy laughs rippled through the group. Rivera didn't laugh. She was already pulling out her phone, typing fast, her thumb hesitating before she hit send. Thompson segregated duty today, Brooks said. Building 7, alone. The words landed exactly as intended. Building 7 sat at the far end of the complex. Old, poorly ventilated, full of damaged rounds waiting for disposal, the place nobody wanted, punishment wrapped in procedure. Thompson nodded once. No argument, no reaction. As she turned to leave, Rodriguez stuck his foot out, a childish move, almost lazy. Thompson stepped over it without breaking stride, shifting her balance in a way that was smooth, practiced, efficient. Rivera noticed. Williams noticed. Even Chen noticed, though he tried not to. Thompson walked alone toward Building 7, her shadow stretching long in the morning sun. Behind her, Brooks was already planning what came next. Rivera was dialing. "Sir," she said quietly when the call connected, "I need a file pulled. Echo Oscar Delta, Unit 723. There was a pause. "Yes, sir, I know it's classified." Another pause. "That's why I'm calling." Inside Building 7, Thompson worked. Not like someone killing time. Like someone reading a language only she understood. Each round was inspected not just for damage but for history, origin, pattern. She noticed things most people wouldn't. Small inconsistencies, a crate logged wrong, a seal that had been handled too recently. An hour in she found it. 3 grenades mixed with small arms ammunition. Wrong type, wrong place, wrong everything. Beads of moisture clung to the casing. White phosphorus. Her breath slowed. White phosphorus didn't explode the way people expected. It burned. It ate oxygen. It turned air into fire. She stared at them, knowing exactly what they were and exactly what would happen if they failed. Protocol said report it. Call EOD, step back. Experience said something else. She isolated the grenades carefully, spacing them, documenting serial numbers in a small notebook hidden in her pocket. She wrote fast, neat, precise. Footsteps echoed at the door. Rivera stood silhouetted in the light. "Specialist Thompson," she said evenly, "my office now." Thompson secured her station and followed. Rivera didn't speak until the door closed behind them. "That badge," she said, "where did you get it?" "It was a gift," Thompson replied, "from someone I served with." Rivera pulled up a photograph on her computer and turned the screen. A unit photo, faces frozen in time. Echo Oscar Delta, Special Operations, Unit 723. Officially non-existent. Unofficially legendary. "They were all killed," Rivera said quietly. "Operation Silent Thunder." Thompson's jaw tightened. "Except one," Rivera continued. "Captain Jessica Mitchell, no body recovered." Silence filled the room. Rivera leaned back. General Robert Mitchell buried an empty coffin 5 years ago. Before Thompson could respond, the alarm blared. Not a drill. Emergency evacuation. White phosphorus didn't wait for permission. "EOD is 15 minutes out," someone said over the radio. Thompson was already pulling on gear. "We don't have 15, she said. She didn't wait for approval. She ran into the smoke. Inside Building 7, the air burned her lungs even through the respirator. The containment unit was failing. The rounds were glowing. She moved fast, no wasted motion, copper sulfate, sand, smothering the reaction, starving the fire. Her hands didn't shake. She transferred the grenades one by one into a reinforced bucket, sealed it, ran. When she emerged, the entire base was watching. General Mitchell had arrived. He saw the bruise on her jaw. His breath caught. "You're still alive." The words cracked him open. And in that moment, the past refused to stay buried. Sometimes strength doesn't announce itself. Sometimes it endures quietly, until the truth can no longer be ignored. Why did the general walk away, instead of ordering everyone to attention? The compound stayed frozen long after his words faded into the morning air. Soldiers who had just witnessed a chemical hazard containment stood unmoving, not because of protocol, but because something far more dangerous than white phosphorus had been exposed. A truth. General Robert Mitchell didn't look back as he walked toward his vehicle. His steps were fast, almost uneven, like a man trying to outrun a memory that had just grabbed him by the throat. His aides struggled to keep up, casting confused glances over his shoulder. Behind them, Vanessa Thompson stood where she was, respirator hanging loose around her neck, sand and chemical residue clinging to her uniform. The bruise along her jaw throbbed now that the adrenaline was draining, but it was nothing compared to the pressure building behind her eyes. Rivera was the first to find her voice. "He recognized you," she said quietly, stepping closer. "That wasn't confusion, that was grief." Thompson shook her head once, a small denial. "He mistook me for someone else." "No," Rivera said, "generals don't do that." Whispers began to ripple through the crowd, questions without owners, speculation without courage. Brooks finally broke the silence. "What the hell was that?" he demanded, his voice sharp with something that wasn't authority anymore. It was fear, thinly disguised. "Why is the base commander asking if you're alive?" Thompson turned away. "Thompson," Rivera said firmly, placing a hand on her arm, "you don't get to disappear now." Thompson stopped but didn't face them. Her shoulders were rigid, like steel bars welded into place by years of habit. "I did my job," she said. "That's all that matters." "That's never all that matters," Rivera replied. Brooks stepped closer, invading her space. "You don't just walk into a chemical hazard and handle it like a senior EOD tech unless you've done it before." Thompson met his eyes then, and something in her gaze made him step back without realizing he had. "I've seen things," she said evenly, "more than you think." Before Brooks could respond, Major Williams pushed through the crowd, his voice cutting clean and sharp. "That's enough," he ordered. "Everyone return to duty now." Reluctantly, the formation broke, but curiosity lingered like smoke. Thompson watched them disperse, knowing something fundamental had shifted. There was no going back to being invisible. Rivera walked beside her toward headquarters. "You didn't deny it," Rivera said. "I didn't confirm anything either." Rivera nodded, smart but temporary. They reached Rivera's office just as Thompson's legs finally betrayed her. She gripped the door frame, breath shallow. "Sit," Rivera said, guiding her into a chair, "before you fall." Thompson obeyed, staring at the floor like it might give her answers. "White phosphorus doesn't show up on this base by accident," Rivera said after a moment. And Brooks didn't panic back there. He calculated. Thompson closed her eyes. "He knew," she said, "not everything but enough." Rivera's phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen and went still. "General Mitchell wants to see you," she said. "Now." Thompson's heart slammed against her ribs. "I can't." "You can," Rivera said gently, "and you should." They walked in silence down the hallway toward the general's office. Each step felt heavier than the last. Thompson's thoughts fractured, images without context. Sand, blood, voices calling her name in a language she hadn't spoken in years. The office door was open. General Mitchell stood by the window, hands braced against the sill like the world outside might collapse if he let go. He didn't turn when they entered. Rivera cleared her throat. "Sir Specialist Thompson is here." Silence stretched. Then softly closed the door. Rivera did and left. The general finally turned. Up close he looked older than Thompson remembered. Deep lines etched his face, not from age but from nights without sleep, from funerals without closure. He stared at her like she might dissolve if he blinked. "What's your name?" he asked. "Vanessa Thompson, sir." His jaw tightened. "That's not what I asked." She swallowed, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. "My name," she said slowly, "is Jessica." The word hit the room like a detonator. His breath left him in a sound that wasn't quite a sob. He crossed the space between them in 3 steps and stopped just short of touching her, as if afraid she wasn't real. "They told me you were dead," he whispered. "They made me bury you." "They buried what they found," she replied. "Not me." He reached out then, trembling, and cupped her face. His thumb brushed the bruise along her jaw, and something in him broke. "Who did this to you?" She hesitated. "It doesn't matter anymore." "It matters to me," he said, voice hardening. "I'm your father before I'm anything else." Her composure cracked just slightly. "He's being handled." The general nodded, but the anger didn't leave his eyes. It just focused. They sat, father and daughter, 5 years of absence compressed into silence. "I thought I failed you," he said finally, "every day." "You didn't," Jessica replied. "You taught me to survive." He laughed softly, bitter. "You always were stubborn." A knock interrupted them. "Sir," Major Williams said through the door, "we have a problem." Brooks. He'd been accessing classified systems, financial anomalies, encrypted communications tied to Afghanistan. Jessica listened, her expression unreadable. "He sold us out," she said when Williams finished. "Him and at least 2 others." "How do you know?" the general asked. "Because I remember," she replied. "Not everything, but enough." The building shook with distant alarms. "Chen," Jessica said, "he's still free." And as if summoned by the truth, gunshots echoed across the base. They ran. The ammunition point was chaos. MPs shouting, soldiers taking cover, smoke curling from Building 7 again. "He's barricaded himself inside," an MP reported. "Shots fired, 1 wounded." Jessica didn't wait. She moved. Rivera grabbed her arm. "Don't." "He knows where the evidence is," Jessica said, "and he knows I'm alive." She slipped around the perimeter, heart pounding with a familiar rhythm. The loading dock door was locked. She bypassed it in seconds. Inside, the warehouse was dim. Dust hung in the air. Somewhere deeper inside, metal scraped against concrete. "Chen." She moved silently, every sense alive. When she saw him, he was frantic, tearing through storage lockers, pistol holstered, sweat streaking his face. "Looking for this," she said. He spun, hand flying to his weapon. Too slow. She closed the distance, deflecting the draw, the shot punching into the ceiling instead of her chest. They fought. Not theatrically, desperately. A crowbar swung. Pain exploded in her shoulder. She ignored it. A knife flashed. She twisted away. 5 years of survival met raw panic. She drove him into a pillar, bone cracked, blood sprayed. Footsteps thundered outside. Chen lunged again, wild now, and she dropped him with a sweep that ended in his head meeting concrete. He didn't move. When the MP stormed in, Jessica was on her knees, breathing hard, blood on her hands that wasn't hers. Rivera knelt beside her. "It's over." Jessica wasn't so sure. Sometimes justice doesn't arrive clean. Sometimes it limps in, bruised and breathing, asking only to be seen. Why did she feel more afraid now than she had during the fight? Jessica sat alone in the infirmary, staring at the thin white bandage wrapped around her shoulder. The pain had settled in, dull, insistent, but it was what kept her awake. It was the quiet, the kind that followed chaos, the kind that gave memories permission to return. The door slid open without a sound. General Mitchell stood there, his uniform jacket removed, rank insignia still catching the light. He looked smaller somehow, like the weight he carried had finally pressed him down instead of holding him upright. "You never liked hospitals," he said softly. Jessica didn't turn. "You never liked seeing me hurt." He took a step closer. "I never liked not knowing where you were." She exhaled slowly. "Neither did I." They stood in silence, the space between them thick with everything they hadn't said for 5 years. You could have come home, he said at last, at any point. She closed her eyes. Home stopped being safe the moment my unit was compromised. He frowned. We hunted every lead, every contact. No one could find you. Because I didn't want to be found, she replied. Not until I knew who sold us out. He absorbed that, and now. She finally looked at him. Now I know. He nodded, jaw tightening. Brooks. Yes, and others higher up, she added. This base wasn't the start, just a node. He paced once, controlled but furious. They used my position to shield themselves. They used your grief, she said gently. That landed harder than accusation. A knock interrupted them. Rivera entered, her face drawn. We've confirmed it. Brooks is in custody. Chen's talking. Jessica didn't feel relief, just emptiness. Casualties, she asked. One injured MP. Stable, Rivera replied. No one else. Jessica nodded. She'd been holding her breath without realizing it. Rivera hesitated. There's something else. The badge. Unit 723, it's circulating. Jessica stiffened. It shouldn't be. Too late, Rivera said. People are asking questions. The general glanced at his daughter. Your cover is burned. Jessica smiled faintly. It was never meant to last. Rivera leaned against the wall. There's a formal inquiry coming. They'll want statements. Media may follow. Jessica shook her head. Not yet. What do you mean? Rivera asked. There's one loose end, Jessica said, and he won't wait. The power flickered. Just once. Enough. The lights dimmed, then surged back, but the damage was done. In that brief window, every instinct Jessica had spent years sharpening screamed the same warning. This wasn't over. She swung her legs off the infirmary bed, ignoring the protest in her shoulder. Jessica, her father said, you're not cleared. She grabbed her jacket. I don't need clearance. The base alarm wailed again, this time lower, more urgent. Sabotage. William's voice crackled over the intercom. All personnel secure positions. Cyber intrusion detected. We've lost access to perimeter cameras. Jessica's pulse steadied instead of spiking. He's inside the network, she said, and he's trying to erase everything. Rivera swore under her breath. Chen already gave up the codes. He had backups, Jessica replied. They always do. They moved fast. The command center was chaos. Screens blinked, feeds looping, timestamps scrambling, a digital smoke screen. Jessica slid into a chair without asking and began typing. You're cleared for that, an officer demanded. Rivera answered for her. She is now. Jessica's fingers moved with calm precision. She wasn't hacking. She was remembering old architectures, old habits, patterns she'd seen in safe houses and enemy bunkers alike. There, she murmured, he's hiding behind a dead satellite relay. The general watched, equal parts awe and guilt twisting in his chest. You learned all this without us, he said quietly. She didn't look up. I had to. A feed snapped into focus. A man's face filled the screen. Brooks. He looked nothing like the man who had barked orders hours earlier. His confidence was gone, replaced by something frantic and desperate. You should have stayed dead, he hissed, eyes locking onto the camera. This ends if you walk away. Jessica leaned closer to the screen. You don't get to decide how this ends, she said. You never did. He laughed, sharp and broken. They'll never believe you, you're a ghost, and ghosts don't testify. She paused, letting the silence stretch. I don't need them to believe me, she said. I just need you to talk. She sent a signal. The system purged. Every encrypted file Brooks had tried to bury flooded into secure servers. Names, dates, payments, orders signed in ink and blood. Brooks' face drained of color. No, he whispered. MPs breached his location moments later. When the screen went dark, Jessica leaned back, exhausted. The room exhaled. Rivera placed a hand on her shoulder. "You did it." Jessica shook her head. "I survived it." Her father approached slowly. "What happens now?" She considered the question. "I stop running," she said, "but I don't disappear." He nodded, eyes wet but proud. Outside, dawn broke over the base, light cutting through smoke and shadow alike. Some scars never fade. But sometimes, facing them is how you finally come home. Why did the truth feel heavier than the danger ever had? Jessica stood alone at the edge of the parade ground, dawn light washing the concrete in pale gold. The base was quiet again, but it was a different quiet now. Not fear, not chaos, a waiting stillness, like a breath being held. Behind her, flags stirred lazily in the morning breeze. In front of her, a row of chairs had been set up overnight, a temporary hearing. No press, no ceremony, just accountability. She adjusted the collar of her uniform. The bruise on her jaw had turned a deep, bruised violet, impossible to hide. She hadn't tried. Rivera joined her, carrying a folder thick with reports. "You don't have to do this," Rivera said. "You've done more than enough." Jessica kept her eyes forward. "I know." "Then why are you still here?" Jessica's answer came slowly. "Because silence protected them, and it almost buried me." They took their seats. The panel filed in, 3 officers, 2 civilian investigators, 1 legal advisor from the Pentagon. Faces neutral, pens poised. The room felt smaller than it was. General Mitchell sat at the back, not at the head, not in uniform, just a father trying not to interfere with his daughter's reckoning. The questions began gently. Name, rank, assignment. Jessica answered evenly. Then the questions sharpened. "Where were you during Operation Silent Thunder?" "Declared KIA," she replied, incorrectly. Murmurs rippled. "Explain." She did, without embellishment, without anger. She spoke of the ambush, of radio silence, of extraction that never came, of waking up in the dark with broken ribs and no unit left to answer her call. She spoke of survival, of moving from place to place, of working in shadows, of helping dismantle networks that had sold them out while pretending to be dead was the only armor she had left. The room listened. Not because she was dramatic, because she was. "And the badge?" one investigator asked. "It belonged to my unit," Jessica said. "I kept it to remind myself who I was when everything else was stripped away." Another question. Why enlist again under a false identity? She paused. "Because I wanted to know if the system was broken, or if it had been broken by people." Silence followed. The lead investigator leaned forward. "And your conclusion?" Jessica met his gaze. "Systems don't betray you, people do." No one argued. Hours passed. Names were read, evidence logged, files connected like threads finally pulled tight. Brooks, Chen, others who had hidden behind ranks and reputations. When it ended, there was no applause, no relief. Just a collective understanding that something irreversible had occurred. Outside, the sun was high now. Rivera walked beside Jessica toward the motor pool. "They're reopening Silent Thunder," she said. "Full review, posthumous commendations, public record." Jessica nodded. "Good." "And for you?" Rivera asked. Jessica hesitated. "That's harder." Her father waited near a Humvee, hands in his pockets. "They offered you reinstatement," he said. "Full rank, commendation, public recognition." Jessica smiled faintly. "They always do it that way." "And I declined." He blinked. "You earned it." "I didn't do this for medals," she replied, "and I don't want to be a symbol." He studied her, searching. "Then what do you want?" She thought of the young private who had tried to speak up, of Rivera standing her ground, of the ones who watched and said nothing because it was easier. "I want to teach," she said, quietly, "before someone else learns the hard way." He nodded slowly. "That sounds like you." A shadow crossed the lot. Media vans waited beyond the gate. "They'll keep asking," he warned. "I know," Jessica said, "but they'll never get the whole story." He reached out, hesitated, then hugged her, tight, unapologetic. She didn't pull away. Later, alone in her temporary quarters, Jessica unpinned the badge from her wall. She held it for a long time. Then she placed it inside a small wooden box alongside a folded photo of her unit, faces young, unaware. She closed the lid. Not to forget, but to move forward. That night she stood under the open sky, breathing in air that didn't burn, listening to the distant hum of a bass slowly returning to routine. She wasn't invisible anymore. She just didn't need to be seen. Some battles aren't won by shouting the truth. Sometimes they're won by living it quietly. Why did peace feel like another kind of battlefield? Jessica woke before dawn the way she always did, even when there was no mission waiting. Her body hadn't learned how to rest without purpose. For a moment she lay still, listening to the unfamiliar quiet of the small, off-base house Rivera had helped her secure. No alarms, no radios, no boots moving in unison outside the door. Just silence. She sat up slowly, rolling her shoulder. The injury had healed enough to stop screaming, but not enough to be forgotten. Pain had become a language she understood fluently. It reminded her she was still here. Outside, the sky was gray and undecided. She brewed coffee and stood at the window, watching the street come alive. Civilians walked dogs. A child pedaled a bike too big for him. Somewhere, a car backfired, and her muscles tightened before she forced them to relax. "You're safe," she told herself. The words felt fragile. Her phone buzzed on the counter. "Rivera." "They moved him last night," Rivera said without preamble. Jessica closed her eyes. "Where?" "Federal holding. He's asking for you." Jessica let out a slow breath. "Of course he is." "He claims he has more names," Rivera continued. "Bigger ones." Jessica stared into her coffee, watching the steam twist and vanish. "He always had more to trade." "Are you going to see him?" Jessica didn't answer right away. She knew the cost of going back into that room, knew how easily old instincts could take over, knew how thin the line was between closure and reopening wounds. "Yes," she said finally, "but not for him." The holding facility was cold in a way that had nothing to do with temperature. Concrete walls, fluorescent lights, everything designed to strip away the illusion of control. Brooks sat on the other side of the glass, wrists cuffed, posture slumped. He looked smaller than she remembered, not defeated, reduced. When she entered the room, he looked up sharply. "You look different," he said, trying for casual and failing. "Alive suits you." She didn't sit. "You wanted to talk," she said. He swallowed. "You don't have to do this. You could walk away. Let the machine grind. That's what it does best." She tilted her head slightly. "You don't know when to stop talking." A flicker of irritation crossed his face. "You think you're better than us." She considered the question. "No," she said. "I think I survived you." He laughed bitterly. "They'll use you, you know that, right? They already are." "Maybe," she replied, "but they won't be using you." He leaned forward, eyes sharp. "You think this ends with me? There are people who don't like loose ends." She leaned in too, just enough for him to see the truth in her eyes. Then they should have tried harder. The confidence wasn't bravado, it was fact. She stood to leave. "Wait," he said, panic creeping in. "Don't you want to know why?" She paused at the door. "I already do," she said quietly, "because you were afraid." She walked out without looking back. Outside, the sun was high and unforgiving. She stood for a moment, letting it warm her face, grounding herself in something real. Rivera waited near the car. Did you get what you needed? Jessica nodded. Enough. They drove in silence. That afternoon, Jessica visited the training range. It had been years since she'd stood on one without a weapon in her hands. Recruits moved through drills, awkward and earnest. She watched quietly from the sidelines, noticing the small things, the hesitation before a command, the glance toward an instructor for reassurance, the ones who tried too hard to disappear. One young woman caught her eye, short, focused, jaw set in that familiar way. She missed a target and flinched, waiting for the reprimand that didn't come. Jessica stepped forward. Mind if I show you something? She asked. The recruit froze, then nodded. Jessica adjusted her stance, her grip just a few inches. The difference was immediate. The next shot hit center mass. The recruit looked at her in awe. How did you know? Jessica smiled softly. Because I've been where you are. As the day wore on, she stayed, answered questions, offered corrections, nothing official, nothing recorded. Just presence. That night she sat alone again, flipping through a notebook she'd carried for years. Names, coordinates, things that never made it into reports. Some of them were crossed out now, some weren't. Her phone buzzed. A message from her father. Proud of you, no matter what you choose. She stared at the words longer than necessary. For so long she had defined herself by what she'd lost, her unit, her identity, her place in the world. Now she was being asked to define herself by what remained. She walked outside and sat on the steps, the night air cool against her skin. Somewhere in the distance, a train horn sounded, low and steady. She thought of the girl on the range, of Rivera's quiet integrity, of the private who had almost spoken up and maybe would next time. Strength didn't always look like survival. Sometimes it looked like staying. She closed her eyes, breathing in the moment. For the first time in years, she wasn't waiting for the next explosion. She was choosing what came after. And that choice felt heavier than any weapon she'd ever carried. Why did she feel calm only after everything was finally laid bare? The morning came without ceremony. No alarms, no urgent calls, just light spilling across the floor where Jessica sat, boots unlaced, hands resting loosely on her knees. For once her thoughts weren't racing ahead, scanning for threats that no longer existed. The base had resumed its rhythm, but she had stepped out of it. She walked the perimeter one last time, not as an operative, not as a ghost wearing borrowed colors, but as someone choosing to leave without running. Soldiers passed her, some nodding respectfully, others unaware of who she was or what she had carried. That anonymity felt earned now, not forced. Rivera met her near the gate. They finalized it this morning, Rivera said. The charges, the reforms, Brooks and the rest won't see daylight for a long time. Jessica nodded. Good. You know this place won't be the same, Rivera added. Jessica smiled faintly. Neither will I. They stood there, the weight of shared history hanging quietly between them. I'm glad you stayed, Rivera said. So am I, Jessica replied. Long enough. Her father waited by his car, not in uniform, not as a general, just a man with tired eyes and a heart that had learned patience the hard way. You don't owe anyone explanations, he said as she approached, least of all me. She looked at him. I owe you the truth. He nodded once. They drove together for a while without speaking, the road stretching out ahead like an open question. At a small overlook outside the city, he pulled over. They stood side by side, watching the horizon soften under the sun. I used to think leadership meant control, he said. Then I lost you, and I realized it meant letting go. Jessica exhaled. I spent years thinking strength meant never stopping, never needing anyone. She turned to him. We were both wrong. He smiled gently, and still here. They embraced not urgently, not desperately, just fully. Later, Jessica returned to the small house one final time. She packed lightly. She always had. The wooden box came last. She opened it, touching the badge once more before placing it back inside. She didn't take it with her. She left it on the shelf. Not as a memorial, as a marker. Outside, the world moved on, indifferent and beautiful in equal measure. She walked toward her car, feeling the ground solid beneath her feet, feeling time move forward instead of circling back. At a stoplight, she caught her reflection in the mirror. The bruise had faded to a faint shadow, a reminder without weight. She thought of all the moments she had chosen silence, and the moment she had finally spoken. Both had saved her. The road stretched open, unmarked by orders or expectations. Somewhere ahead there were classrooms, ranges, quiet conversations that might change a life before it broke. She turned the key and drove. Strength didn't roar. It didn't demand recognition. It didn't announce survival. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.